As was mentioned, I'm Glenn Townsend. I am a person living with HIV, and I've been living with HIV for a very long time. I was first diagnosed in 1985 when the tests first became available. And by all means at that point, one was told that maybe 18 months, 2 years, get your affairs in order, that's it. I was a little skeptical at that point. I still am somewhat. Not that it has not been a very bumpy ride. During that time, I did get myself back to school. I went to work, and I worked for a number of years as an accountant, and then I moved over to community living programs where I finally had to go into retirement with my last portfolio. It was working with people with acquired brain injuries. My path with HIV, I was what was at the time considered a long-term non-progressor, which meant that for many years nothing seemed to happen, but I can tell you that HIV was alive and well inside of me. And in 1995, I hit the wall, and I found myself very ill and not able to work, and all of a sudden having to rely on a lot of things that I had not intended to ever have to rely on. One of the processes was going from full-time employment, which I'd reduced to three-quarter employment to keep myself working as long as I could. The problem with that, of course, is none of the plans are flexible. So when I did finally have to go on long-term disability, I was given 65% of 75% of my full wage, and that's what I remain on today. I went on EI benefits first, and then I was transitioned to my long-term disability plan through my group insurance at work. And then, of course, at the appropriate time, they said, well, you have to apply for CPP disability. And at the time, I was so ill, it was very difficult to be looking at all these forms and even knowing how to do this process. At the time, I really didn't have a whole lot of assistance and help, so when I first filled out the forms, I was rejected. And it was another 18-month review process when I finally did get my benefits after going to see advocates and making sure that the forms were filled out correctly. And I have been on those programs since. So the one other problem that I will mention with this is when I did get the back payments for my CPP disability, which at that point was about 2 years of benefits, it was taxable. And so in that particular year, too, my employer decided to pay out my vacation time. I wound up with a pretty large tax bill all at once. And there was no way to write it off because I maxed out all of my deductions. So, you know, in hindsight, if I'd had time to plan and I knew what I know now, I would have done things very differently. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the lived experience of living with HIV. In 1995, there weren't a lot of treatments available, but it was just about the time when the triple therapy cocktail or the multiple drug therapy came available. And, you know, those drugs were very toxic. I can tell you some of the early combinations. You may notice that I wear steel-toed boots. I have to. I have no sensation in my feet. As a result, I have nerve damage. It's permanent. And in order not to injure myself, I make sure that they're protected. You know, there are things that I've had to learn to live with. I've had to learn with significant body changes. And that has changed over the years. I've gone through several periods of wasting where I've gone from my normal weight, which used to be about 170 pounds, down to about 115. And now to its rather robust 230, which is a little more than I would like it, but part of that is you know, how my body copes with the medications and all of the things that it's been through. Impact-wise with employment was really hard for me. I love my work. You know, I got into community-based programming, which and And part of that was dealing with people with multiple barriers to participating in life. So what we're doing here now, is kind of almost a continuation, except I'm, part of what's under the microscope here. So it's interesting to be on the other side of that. So I have a little bit of perspective about, both sides of the equation. Currently, I hear a lot of things, we hear these little clips about, HIV now is a chronic inflammatory disorder and, a few pills and everything will be kind of okay. I really want to caution with the people around the room here that, unfortunately, HIV is a very complex disease. And what I've learned myself and also in my involvement with the BC Persons with AIDS Society is, first of all, people do not get diagnosed early on for the most part. When we see people at our door, they have already had an opportunistic infection before they've had their diagnosis. So if you did get screened very quickly when you were easily diagnosed, you probably can live a normal life. That's not the lived experience yet. So I want to caution people around the room here to take that information and dissect it a little bit and unpack it and look at all the consequences of it. For myself as an individual, up until about 6-7 years ago, the idea of being able to return to work was probably not even on the horizon. But I have responded very well to the medications that I'm on now. I still have to deal with neuropathy. I have to deal with very limited energy. I have other medical problems as well as HIV. So, HIV in itself is one part of the individual. And I think that we have to remember that in all cases. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of dramatic stories, but I can tell you that the early years of treatment were hell. At one point, I was on 58 pills a day. I had about 2 hours of when I could eat what I wanted, and then I wasn't hungry. I either had to eat fat, or I couldn't eat anything with fat, or I couldn't eat anything at all. And these drugs did a lot of damage to my body. Permanent damage. I have had kidney problems, liver problems, and those probably are not going to go away. So, for my own personal journey, I will do the best that I can, and I'm certainly looking forward to, having more participation in my life. What I've done over the last few years is, once my energy got to a point where my health was relatively stable, I started to volunteer. And that's been part of my, and why I'm here today, actually, is I'm currently the chair of the BC Persons with AIDS Society. And we are an HIV-positive driven agency. All of our board of directors are living with HIV, and all the decisions that the organization are made by people living with HIV. So we have a very personal stake in some of the outcome around these meetings here. What I can tell you is one of the problems that we've had is not that there aren't, I think the supports that we have out there were very good when they were first designed, but one of the things that we're seeing right now is there needs to be a shift in thinking. Someone is not necessarily either totally disabled or totally able to work. And that's where we come in here, because that's where the kind of the problem area is. I would like to participate as fully as I can, and I would like to probably go back to my employer and try and do a bit of work. However, if I do that, I lose all of my benefits. And that's kind of scary, because I can't get them back easily. The CPP disability I can now, fortunately, thanks to the work of many people and for the people at Social Services Canada that have worked very hard on those things, but that's only part of the equation, and we have the other partners that we have to work with. So I think I'm going to kind of end it there.
When Melissa contacted me to come and speak at this event, I accepted graciously, first and foremost because the experience at working at the AIDS Committee of Ottawa is something I hold very near and dear to me, and carry that still with me in my current role now with the city. So basically what I'll do is I'll just give a little bit of an explanation, as I said, about what I did when I was at the AIDS Committee of Ottawa. There is a program center there called The Living Room, and I was one of the program coordinators there for about 3 to 4 years. Part of my role is we did practical services to people as well as psychosocial support. I think the part that I wasn't prepared for was that I would be helping people with things like accessing income support programs. There wasn't a class at school that taught frontline workers about how to help clients with this issue. As I said to Melissa too, when we talked on the phone, if I only knew when I was at ACO all the information I have now working for Ontario Works, I could have been such a bigger asset to clients to assist them with some of these challenges that they were facing. So basically, in terms of the clientele that we worked with, it was a group that I would say there's ongoing crisis all the time, that accessing income support programs, whether it be the term at that time was welfare, everyone referred to it as welfare, not Ontario Works, or Ontario Disability, that was almost like the bare bottom of the list. Even though people need money to live, they had their day-to-day stuff going on in terms of whether it be housing issues, about mental illness, to addictions, to you name it. Like, it was a gamut of issues that we were working with people on. So sometimes it would be put to the bottom of the list, but people need money to live, right? So that's where it would come back up. So, as I said, as a AIDS service organization worker, I had very minimal training about income support programs and how to assist clients with that. I would say it was the clients who I learned from, who were actually going through the process, that then I became knowledgeable as I had the hands-on experience with people. I did have a little bit of training through the Ontario AIDS Network. We would go yearly to a conference in Toronto. And that was a topic that would be definitely brought up and that there'd be learning on. But as programs changes as well, it's difficult for even those in the system, and I'll say now that I'm working in the system, it's difficult as a case coordinator to keep up on the policies and changes, let alone and make sure that the people who are accessing those programs know that information as well. I think a challenge that definitely I dealt with when I was at ACO was about some of the myths around Ontario Disability, specifically about the application process and how to even go about applying, to about people being denied, and about the appeal process. And that was really challenging to support people through that process, because then again, it's the myth versus what is actually fact. And when you're on the outside, you don't really know, and you're just trying to support people through the motions of what's going on. Another definite big challenge was the self-report with the Ontario Disability Support Program application. I worked with a lot of people who they couldn't fill out that form for various reasons, whether it be literacy issues, language barriers. And then, I often had myself in situations where I'd be sitting with, middle-aged man, and you're talking about things like bathroom functions, day-to-day stuff to try to put in that application. And it's very intimate details for a person to be sharing with you and to try to assist them with that process. In terms of something that I've definitely witnessed since coming to Ontario Works is when I was at ACO, the wait time for when someone would apply for Ontario Disability was, if I can remember or put myself back at that time, was long, was very long, and detrimental to the person's health while they were in limbo receiving welfare while they should have been on really Ontario Disability. What I see now, and that's more so, like I said, in my current role, is that there's definitely, we'll say, the timelines increase when those decisions are made at the Disability Adjudication Unit in Toronto, which is great, because people who should be on that program and not receiving, say, as a single person, $572 a month on Ontario Works. So sort of just one of the practices that's done in our office that I think is helpful for people around making decisions when they even apply for Ontario Works. And this is something, like I said, if I would have known when I was at ACO, I'm sure would have been helpful, but around applying for sick benefits with employment insurance. And often what we do is, because if someone's applying for Ontario Works and their EI benefits are just at that cusp of coming through, it's basically signing someone up to be on Ontario Works for 3 to 4 months. A lot of people don't want that commitment. If they know that their EI check has been processed, they want to shut down the application. And we have means to be able to find that out through workers in our office who do the agreement to reimburse part with the assignment of benefits for things like employment insurance. In terms of, I guess, some of the frustrations that I experienced in working with clients while they were trying to access, whether it be welfare or disability, big bone of contention is the transportation issue. People who need to get to medical appointments and have ongoing medical appointments. And I can remember, and I don't really know if it was a welfare requirement at the time or an Ontario disability requirement at the time, but that clients would come in with these log sheets and we would have to sign to show that they had actually accessed our services for that day in order to, I guess, verify or prove the need for medical transportation. In terms of a fear that I think a lot of people who I worked with experienced around, say, trying to resume employment activities was, of course, with Ontario Works, you get the drug card. So what happens if I don't have coverage for medication? Huge issue. And just sort of back to, I guess, a piece that ACO I thought really was successful at in helping clients in the application process is many of the individuals we worked with were very transient or lived in, we'll say, not the best housing. So in terms of, say, boarding houses or boarding rooms and rooming houses, that they weren't even guaranteed that they were going to get their mail. So how are you supposed to go through the process of applying for something like disability if you don't even know if you're going to get notification in the mail because someone's stealing your mail? So we used to do things at ACO in terms of that clients were able to use our agency address as a moving address or as a mailing address, as well as things like the fax and very practical things, but I think that assisted people with sort of going through the motions of the application. And of course, there was the huge piece, and I was at ACO roughly from 2000 to 2004, the fear of disclosure. What's going to happen when I go in and talk to my welfare worker and actually tell them that I'm positive? And so we did a lot of support with people around that issue. I guess just sort of in wrap up, in terms of, like I said, I wish so much that I could go back now and work at ACO because I could offer a very different perspective as someone who now is working for Ontario Works. And in fact, I was mentioning to Sharon before we got started, I'm going in a couple of weeks to the AIDS Committee of Ottawa to do a presentation to clients and staff there to, get things sort of up to speed about Ontario Works and Ontario Disability and make sure that I'm accessible to them if they have questions or concerns at all around that program. One thing that I think is, and I don't know, I feel like I'm very solution-focused, so I don't want to be solution-focused. I did motivational interviewing last week as part of my training, so I see the trend that I want to go to solution-based ideas. But one thing that I know our office is doing, and I think it's a great way to be able to assist clients and to make sure that clients are getting the best care and access to services. And now specifically I'm doing a role where I carry a caseload of individuals with mental illness, diagnosed or undiagnosed. And we have a group that meets monthly that is made up of service providers as well as income support reps, so people from Ontario Works, people from Ontario Disability. And these issues that people are dealing with, these cases, we bring them up and try to strategize on how to serve these people best and make sure that people are getting what they're entitled to. So that's it.
Thank you very much.